Hey, what's up, guys? If you're looking to support a USA-based Christian-owned business, look no further than Mythology Candles, spelled with an I-E. Mythology Candles is a small family-run business based out of Washington State that makes nerdy candles for all you fantasy and history geeks out there like myself. They are the #1 fantasy-inspired candle brand online, and they're known for creating really unique scent experiences along with cool bespoke packaging, making it a thrilling unboxing experience. Each collection is inspired by a story or location from literature, history, or folklore, even popular tabletop and video games. Plus, Mythology's commitment to using super clean ingredients means you can burn their candles all day without worrying about your kids, pets, or personal health. Fun fact here. Mythology Candles was founded by Leah, a musician and homeschool mother of 5, and her husband in 2020. The company has grown from her kitchen to a full-blown warehouse and growing team of hardworking employees, and they are still homeschooling their 5 children. They have a special coupon just for our listeners today. Go to mythology with an IE candles.com and use the code in all caps Cultish to get 10% off your first purchase. That's Mythology Candles with an IE.com and the code all caps Cultish during checkout. Happy nerdy candle shopping.
All right, welcome back to Cultish, ladies and gentlemen. This is part 2, exploring the Baha'i faith. Back with Steve Matthews. Good to have you back, man.
Great to be here.
Awesome. So let's just jump right into it. So we kind of wrapped up the last episode talking about the history of Baha'i, which is just so fascinating, and then also a lot of their beliefs. And so let's just pick up where we started. I think you were about to talk about what they believe about the afterlife.
Yes, life after death.
Let's jump into it.
So Baha'is, we talked about, believes that Jesus is one of 9 great manifestations that God has sent to us, and we keep getting updates on like who the prophet who God sends us to. He's Buddha was for his age. Jesus replaced him, then Muhammad replaced Jesus, then he had the Bab, and now we're under Baha'u'llah. So we went through a lot of that. So as far as life after death for the Baha'i, they believe the soul is eternal. There's no heaven or hell, and it's a bit vague. They talk about after you're dead, the soul will progress. And of course, Baha'is do not believe in evil. They believe in an absence of good. We talked about that last week. So heaven and hell are not physical locations, but more of like a spiritual state. Mm-hmm. And after we die, we don't get resurrected, but we move to a new kind of existence as a non-physical being where the spirit continues to progress through eternity towards God. And how we live in this life, really, according to our works, right, and our hearts, that kind of determines, how we live the Baha'i message. That kind of determines how close we're going to move towards God in the afterlife as we continue to progress.
Yeah.
So that's kind of finishing up on a lot of the doctrinal part. I still wanted to hit a couple of areas, their practices and their calendar, which is kind of relevant. But if you had anything else if you want to ask me anything on the life after death or make any cool insights, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, well, just what's really interesting is that video of Rainn Wilson, where he does talk about the distinction between soul and body. That him saying that actually now makes sense when you explain what they believe about life after death. Is there any sense where, like as Christians, we look at the hope of life after death based off a historical account of the resurrection, and that's a big point of focal point for us? How does their belief of life after death, how does that play into the present with how they practice their faith?
It's basically, if you do the rituals which we're about to get into in Bahaism, their practices, and do your proper recitations and that kind of stuff, it really affects your spiritual status in the life after death. Christianity is very different. A lot of Christians get this wrong, and it's kind of important. I'm glad I get a chance to say this here. A lot of people have this idea of almost like a Greek idea, even in churches, that we're like a spirit trapped in a body. Yeah. But that's not a biblical New Testament view. The biblical view is God creates us as a spirit and a body. We're not a ghost in the machine. The Greeks would talk about we're the sema and the soma, the soma, the sema, we're the tomb of the soul. We're not just a ghost in the machine. The biblical view is that God creates Jerry, Steve, as a whole, whether it's with the physical and the spiritual together. That is our destiny after we die. We'll have a resurrected, perfected body, and our spirit will also be fully redeemed at that point. But the biblical view is definitely a view where who you are, your identity, is your spirit and your body is one thing, not just like we're spirit trapped. You hear a lot of churches say this. That's why I was concerned, because they just make it sound like the spiritual is the higher good and the physical is the lower good, almost like a Gnostic view. But the proper informed Christian view is that is our identity, a gift from God. Our spirit and our body is our one, which will be all resurrected in the new kingdom.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times that makes sense too, because a lot of times with that, you'll see a lot of times Christians will sort of pendulum swing between two, where all of a sudden there's an emphasis on the spirit. They're not Gnostic; they're just an emphasis on spiritual things. Or sometimes they focus on everything that's like physical, the material world around them, and then they kind of ignore the spiritual side of it.
We're a physical, spiritual being. That's what God made us.
Yeah, and usually that's a good way to kind of even navigate everything through life. So definitely good. So what does the practice look like? And this would also again correlate. So again, I live in Arizona. So if I go down and if I walk into a Baha'i faith, what do they practice? Is it a Sunday, a Saturday, any day of the week?
They have all kinds of meetings. They have Ruhi studies at home, Ruhi. They have deepening. Okay. So Ruhi is when you're going there and you go through a set of, it started in Colombia, but it's a bunch of self-studies that you do in these circles, these groups, and you kind of go into the twin manifestation study and all the different studies about Baha'i teaching to kind of get you into that. So they'll do that. They have other things called firesides, where they'd try to invite people to come and learn about the Baha'i faith and get recruited. It's funny, they say we don't believe in having missionaries. They just call them pioneers. They're the same thing.
Yeah.
So they kind of redefine things, but they say they're not really missionary-oriented religion, but they kind of are.
Yeah, so what other practices would that entail?
So when you become a Baha'i, I covered this last week, you make this declaration on a pledge card, now you're a Baha'i. You're basically agreeing that Baha'u'llah is the manifestation for today, and Baha'i faith authority, so that makes you Baha'i. In the day-to-day life of a Baha'i, you do these obligatory prayers. And Baha'is 15 years and older, they say one of these 3 different prayers every day. One's a short prayer, it's made every day between noon and sunset. You do a medium prayer, like, these are all recited. Let's talk about vain repetitions, right? So you do a medium, if you're a Christian, you know what that means. Jesus said, don't do them. So a medium prayer, you do it 3 times a day, in the morning, at noon, in the evening. And in a long prayer, you can say anytime you want. On top of that, you have to repeat the words, Allahu Abha, and that means God is most glorious. You got to repeat that 95 times a day. So that's kind of like another ritual you got to do in Bahaism. Interestingly, you have to pray towards the shrine of Baha'u'llah.
Yeah.
So the Qibla, you got to Qibla. That's the same way the Muslims, they pray towards the Kaaba. You got to pray now towards Baha'u'llah's shrine. Now Muslims, in the technological age, they have GPS apps. You can open that up and it'll point you right towards, Mecca, or where, they'll point right there. This is all the technology. So they also have a belief called Hukukullah. It's called the right of God. It's a wealth tax of 19%. And it's very similar to the Qums in Islam. They no drugs, no alcohol for Baha'is. No cremation for Baha'is. They do a pilgrimage, so just like the Muslims have, their pilgrimage. The Baha'is also have one where they do a 9-day pilgrimage to northwestern Israel, where they visit the Baha'i World Center and several other Baha'i holy sites. So just to kind of give you a feel for some of the interesting laws that Baha'u'llah was about. So, and as I said, they don't do cremation, but they have this ritual when you die. You cannot move the body more than 1 hour's journey from the place of death. Okay. The body has to be wrapped in a shroud of silk or cotton and put only in a coffin, a crystal and hardwood or a stone. It's very specific. These are Baha'i laws. According to Baha'u'llah, you have to do it this way. And then the feet have to go to Akka, where Baha'u'llah's resting place is. You have to point the feet in the tomb towards there. So just like you pray towards Baha'u'llah, the feet in the tomb. So it's very, you can see this. And I'd like to talk for a minute just to give you a feel of how they revere these Baha'i important figures. We talked about the central figures, Abdul Baha, the Bab, Baha'u'llah, and how they really fit into the life of Baha'i. So Baha'is have a calendar. It's called the Baha'i calendar. Right now we're in the year 180 in the BE, the Baha'i era. So this is just like Shincheonji we talked on an earlier show. We're in year 40, because, Shincheonji started in 1984, and now we're in year 40. Well, for Baha'is, we're in year 180. So a lot of cults will do that. Scientology does it with L. Ron Hubbard. They kind of, recreate the dating according to the cult leader. Yeah. So they took this from the Bab, their calendar. They have 19 months consisting of 19 days. And when you multiply that, it comes out to 361, and they have 4 intercalary days. So they kind of make it, and they have a leap one too. So they kind of fit the calendar into 19 months. They have festivals, feast, a fast, and 9 holy days where Baha'is suspend work and school. The festival of Rizvan is a 12-day festival commemorating the declaration of Baha'u'llah in the Garden of Rizvan. They have a 19-day feast. So on each of the 19 months, on the first day, they have a special feast, and it's the Baha'i on the Baha'i calendar. They have a Baha'i 19-day fast on March 2nd to 20th. The festival Rizvan is Arabic for paradise. So this is a 12-day festival held from April 21st to May 2nd to celebrate the 12 days that Baha'u'llah spent in the Garden of Rizvan in Baghdad in 1763. And this is when he announced that he was God's messenger and the prophet that the Bab had foretold. Baha'u'llah said this is to be their most holy festival, and the first, 9th, and 12th days are special holy days in Rizvan. Nowruz is the Baha'i New Year in March 21st. Some more of their holidays: the Declaration of the Bab, the Ascension of Baha'u'llah, the Martyrdom of the Bab, and the twin holy days. They have birthdays basically celebrating for Baha'u'llah and the Bab. They're in sequential one day of another. So it just shows how they make their days. They miss work, they miss school, and they have all these days commemorating Abdul Baha, the Bab, and Baha'u'llah. So they kind of ingrain it into your system by doing that.
What's up, everybody? It's the Super Sleuth here, and I've got a snack that you're absolutely going to want to try. It's called Biltong. Never heard of it? Well, now you have. It's from Farmer Bill's Provisions. It's like beef jerky, except it doesn't have any of the sugar, soy, any of the preservatives, none of that nonsense. We're not going to snap into Slim Jims today. Stuff is gross. Instead, we're going to fill our bodies with the protein and the fat that it actually needs. And this stuff is so beautiful. There's even like a nice marbling effect with it in each slice that you have. It's like having your own preserved New York steak strip. Not to mention, there's fantastic flavors, guys. There's original spicy chili, smokehouse, and my favorite right now, which is bison. All you got to do is go to their website to order. That's farmerbillsprovisions.com. And the owner of this company is a Christian who does listen to Cultish, and that is so cool. And right now, if you go to the website and at checkout use Cultish20 in all caps, CULTISH20, you can get 20% off today. farmerbillsprovisions.com. Have a great day, guys.
It's so different. I mean, this is what's interesting is that most people who even are appealed to the Baha'i, it's like they just want to get the experience, and they just want to get just
the
be
love, peace, and joy.
Love, peace, and joy, and all.
But
then
you're signing up for. That's kind of why I want to spend a little time on this, because when you're buying in, exactly like you said, the carrot is like, oh, come be part of this giant, peace movement of brotherhood and love in the world, where we're going to make men and women equal and all eliminate prejudice and big happy human family.
Yeah.
But what are you doing when you're going in? Your calendar's full of these Baha'i feast days and fast and recognitions of these Baha'i leaders. Then you're doing the recitations like so many times a day, and these prayers, obligatory prayers. It's not something that can coexist with another faith. It really takes you over to be part of this, right?
Well, even this is that, like, I feel like I'd almost share a commonality with someone who's just wanting to be part of something bigger than themselves and kind of go for the emotional experience, brotherhood, we are the world part of it. But when you're going through all of these terms, it seems to me that there probably would be a lot of people who would get into a movement like this, not really looking at, and again, going back to an iPhone analogy, it's like when you do the iOS update and you have to scroll through,
what did I sign up for?
2 minutes of legal things just to get an update on your phone.
Up for this?
You're like, what in the transhumanism is this? Like, that's a whole nother conversation.
It's kind of like you got to accept the terms on that level.
Right. And so this is just interesting, is that as you kind of unravel this, you do sort of see this connection to it being a spinoff of Islam, because now you're having to do these specific rituals, that they have their own calendar, their own holy days. And every single religion also has their own holy days as well too. So then you have, again, eventually something does have to butt heads eventually. So the question is, at some point something just has to give. Like sometimes you'll think, and regardless of what it is, sometimes you'll think something's compatible, but eventually it'll show up eventually.
Yeah.
So do you think we've covered everything as far as
we're just ready to show why.
What's the response to all this? Because I would be very interested myself too. I only read the very beginning of Soul Boom. I would really like later on to maybe read the book and now read it through new eyes. So the question would be, for anyone, most people really don't know too much about Baha'i, but then they understand this. So then the question is, how do we respond to something like Baha'i from an apologetic perspective? So in the same way how Rainn Wilson would view us as Christians analyzing Baha'i, he would see, we're just really adhering to a manifestation of Baha'u'llah. We would just see this as ultimately this is a incorrect, false belief with a different Jesus, a different gospel, a different way of salvation. And in that sense, it would fit into the Walter Martin's classical definition of a cult, because they do have to have they have Jesus on their team. They're trying to have it, but again, they're redefining who Jesus is. He's not God come in the flesh. He's not the Jesus who rose from the dead. He's not the historical Jesus.
A martyred teacher who went and got himself killed.
Yeah, so Jesus from them is only a historical figure to the extent that it fits into their mold. They've molded Jesus into their image. But so how then...
They throw it as miracles too.
Oh yeah. So what's the starting point? What's the starting apologetic to give an answer?
Well,
say from somebody who's in Baha'i.
They kind of know this is a target. So basically the most obvious one is, they try to think that this view, all religions are from the same God. They're all the same. They've kind of been updated.
Yeah.
That's a huge problem. You got to live in a universe where squares are circles and circles are squares to say that all religions are the same.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. There's such huge differences across the board and within the religions, right? So you have Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, which are basically monotheistic religions. In Buddhism, which is basically agnostic, there's no talk about God at all. In Zoroastrianism, you have two divine deities constantly battling the good, the bad one together. In Hinduism, you have 388 million gods, so they're polytheistic. How can all these different, views of God be reconciled? The same way with life after death. You have Christianity, which believes in a resurrection. You have Buddhism and Hinduism believe reincarnation. They're very, very different. Baha'is try to say, well, they're the same at the core, but the social issues and some of those things are different. And as Ravi used to say, some people say that all religions are fundamentally the same but superficially different. The better way to understand it is that all religions are fundamentally different but superficially the same. Mm-hmm. So instead of trying to say, you can't reconcile. How can they all be from the same God? Seriously, is God can honestly speak in one era, teach millions of gods, come back in another era, teach there's no God,
right.
Come back in another cycle, there's two gods or one God. I mean, this sounds like a pretty confused God,
yeah,
right?
Well, that's the path you go down to. And again, if you end up trying to be all-inclusive, you end up excluding the exclusivists. So eventually something does have to give
right.
when it comes to that.
But this is like central to religion, right? It's like, how many gods is there?
Mm-hmm.
What is the view of life after death? Irreconcilable differences. That's why they're different religions. Baha'is try to have their cake and eat it.
Yeah.
Impossible. Baha'u'llah says, in Gleanings from the Writings of Baha'u'llah, he goes, "Know thou assuredly that the essence of the prophets of God is one and the same. To prefer one in honor to another, to exalt certain ones above the rest, is in no wise to be permitted." So basically, all manifestations are the same, all views are the same. It's such a stretch to Baha'i. So in talking to Baha'is, I'd really pursue that question. How can one God reveal the different manifestations, internally contradictory things? And we believe in non-contradiction, and it just doesn't work with Bahaism.
Yeah.
What's up, guys? I want to let you know about Forged Beard Co. They exist to bring 100% all-natural beard care to freedom-loving men everywhere so that you can smell, look, and feel your bearded best. Their products are intentionally crafted to bring life to your beard and bring relief to problems like coarse, dry, itchy beards and skin irritation. They have a wide range of incredible scents to choose from, so there's something for everyone. Head to forgedbeardco.com right now and use the code in all caps Cultish to get a free bottle of beard oil when you spend over $50. Thanks, guys.
Good. And then what would you ask them, say, if you bring up Jesus specifically? Like, that's something I always like, at least for me, when it comes to even, like I say, I've had a lot of interactions with my LDS friends and neighbors, and even with something like that, I feel like that also when you're talking with the cultists, there's always, and Walter Martin would talk about this too, there's so many different rabbit trails you can kind of go down. Like, there are a lot of times people will talk with Mormons. I've seen people who are brand new. They'll start going rabbit trails of like the polygamy or some weird aspect of church history. Sometimes it's something that they may not even know.
You're so right.
And I like to just do this.
Major on the majors, not the minors. Like when you talk to Jehovah's Witness, don't get sidetracked by voting on birthdays, going to war.
Exactly.
Stay on the Trinity. You can get lost on that stuff all day long. You're 100% right.
So when it comes to Baha'i, then what are areas that are just rabbit trails, but what are the focal points you should focus on?
Well, the things like we said, who is God, who is Christ, those are huge ones. So for the Baha'is, like we covered last week, he is just a teacher, didn't perform miracles, didn't raise from the dead. He was just a guy, went and got himself crucified and then as a martyr. And then 3 days later, it kind of popped up in the understanding of his followers, what he's been teaching all those 3 years. We want to basically talk biblically and show, who did Jesus say he is? He even asked that question, who do men say that I am? If he can ask that question, we can ask that to Baha'i. So who is Jesus? He asked it himself in Matthew chapter 16. Jesus is clearly God in the Bible. He receives prayer, he receives worship, he is called God blatantly. When Thomas encountered the risen Christ, who was not, well, for Baha'is, he wasn't even risen, right? So what happens at the end of John chapter 20, right? So when he beholds him, he calls him his Lord, his God. It's very clear, and Jesus accepts it. The Father calls the Son God in Hebrews 1:8. He says, "Thy throne, O God, is forever and ever." You see that all across the board. Biblically speaking, also, Baha'is will call Baha'u'llah the Spirit of Truth. And they go to John chapters 14 to 16 and say, see, that Spirit of Truth will come. That's Baha'u'llah. He will give you things. Well, for the Christian, the Spirit of Truth is clearly the Holy Spirit, which was given at Pentecost. We didn't have to wait till, the declaration of Baha'u'llah, 1,800 years later. Right. It was very clear from Scripture.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. You may have addressed this earlier in the podcast, but let me maybe it would be good for us, maybe re-clarify. It would be good for me as well, too. So Jesus is a manifestation of Baha'u'llah, and so...
A manifestation of God.
Manifestation of God.
But he was so 4 prophets ago.
Right. Oh, yes, definitely. But in relation, you said, because they will sort of pay lip service and may cherry pick or quote a verse from the Bible. How do they view the Bible in relation to how they view Jesus? Is there some sort of level of credibility? This is a manifestation.
The Bible's
of
not a very accurate book, and Baha'u'llah's writings would be taken as authoritative.
But there's still
some... Effendi has attacked the Bible.
Yeah, but there's still some level of credence. Like, this is the blind man. There's still a portion of the elephant if you're a blind person, that there's areas in which they still have adherence to it. So there's some level of reverence or respect for it.
They pick and choose. They proof text, cherry pick, whatever supports Bahaism. So they literally twist a verse. They don't really want to know what the Bible teaches. They don't, they don't want to go along with who Jesus is if he says who he was, Who Jesus says he was is more important, but they don't want to do that. They just want to fit it into the mold. Yeah. Like I think you said last week, like Baha'u'llah.
Yeah. So maybe my question would be this. So like Walter Martin, and the thing I loved about him, and every now and then I like to it's just like a palate cleanser. It's like just a clump of ginger. Is to listen to an old Walter Martin message, and I've just started to re-listen to some of his old lectures. Oh, it's great. And the one thing that Wally was so brilliant on was just speaking to the audience in their native tongue. So when he was lecturing on Hare Krishna, and he, at the very end, he talked about a relationship with Jesus Christ is the ultimate trip of the human soul.
Amen.
So he's kind of utilizing, you see what he's
contextually.
Doing. Contextually, he's utilizing their vernacular. So my question would be, when it comes to, given that we want to scale the language barrier, we would want to talk with someone in the Baha'i, how do we utilize, because God's word doesn't return void, how would we lower the language barrier in a conversation utilizing Scripture and talking to someone who's in the Baha'i? What would be a focal starting point for that?
There's a few ways to do it. I mean, they do want to create this kind of utopia on earth through their love and their brotherhood and everything. Yeah. But the problem is that you have to show the existential reality of wars, of murder, rape, all the stuff that happens as part of the human condition. The liberals, they talked about the brotherhood of man and everything in the 1920s, the modernists when they fought against the fundamentalists in America. And the world wars really shook a lot of those people up. It's like, it's inarguable. Like, now we have the nations of the world fighting, killing each other. And this is man's nature at its core. It's my nature. It's your nature. It's the Bahai's nature. It's Baha'u'llah's nature. They're going to say, no, he was sinless. But absolutely, it's human nature to have that dark side. And I think that's an amazing proof of the uniqueness of Christianity, that the Bible is the only religion and worldview that gets it right on who man is and nails it. That on one hand, we got this beautiful, amazing side, created image of God who will die for a stranger, will do the Sistine Chapel art and write symphony, just a beautiful, creative, great side. But then we got this evil, wicked, dark side. that they deny. They think man is basically good, and we can do through self-reformation. But we do have a valuable, beautiful side, but we do have that dark side, and there's no other religion, no cult, no psychological philosophy that nails it just like the Bible nails identity man. So I think that's really important, because we're trying to build this utopia. Why do we need to build a utopia? Because it's fallen. If it was already in a good place, we wouldn't have to build a utopia, right?
Yeah.
The fact that something's broken to make us need to fix it, the fact that there's prejudice that we need to eliminate, shows that there's a deeply entrenched problem. That's part of mankind. I mean, they want to get to the point when they say we want to eliminate greed. It just kind of, you see where it's going this. So it's kind of self-refuting in that sense.
Well, this would be like somebody running, it would be as if I was trying to run a watch repair shop with a fundamental, adamant belief that watches can never get broken.
You wouldn't have a watch store. Well, I mean, the thing is, why eliminate prejudice if man is basically good? Why no more? They say we want to have peace. Why have peace if it's not man's nature to do war? It's kind of a self-refuting thing. And they talk about in the future, they will talk about the elimination of extremes of poverty and wealth. How the heck are they going to do that with sinful man? Unless every single person somehow becomes a Baha'i, which they would say, and then all of a sudden their hearts are changed, that we're going to want to give away all our money to have kind of the socialist utopia. It really, it's not realistic. I mean,
even the sense that like I could technically do that, like we're running a watch repair shop, but having that fundamental belief. But there's two ways I'd have to address it. I would have to have a very lack of self-awareness, or I would have to redefine terms. I would have to redefine what broken is. Right?
Well, and what they say is, it's going to be the job of, there's going to be an international force, almost like a military force. They don't like to say that, but it's basically, it's going to be enforced by the Universal House of Justice, this international force through the tribunals that will help legislate these things to make them in pass. So if you don't want to give your money away to create this more equality, well, we got somebody who can do that for you. And that's kind of so that's kind of like a scary side too. This kind of world task force that's under the Universal Justice to regulate the laws of Baha'u'llah.
So you've got Baha'i F-16s that would ensure that we have a utopia.
Pretty much. It's scary. It's scary.
Yeah, I mean, history, and that is scary in the sense because, I mean, history is full of people that want to have a utopia by way of the sword, and it never.
From Alexander the Great to Hitler. Yep.
That's very interesting, and I would be curious as far as I really want to read Soulboom, because I'm really wondering. So, like I said, Rainn Wilson, I love. That's one of my all-time favorite shows. I mean, Dwight's one of the all-time great iconic characters in television ever. I mean, it's up there. I mean, I think 100 years from now, people will still be watching The Office.
It's sad that he doesn't know, the reality of Bahaism. I'm going to cover some other stuff in a minute that I wish I could sit down with Rainn and show him some of this stuff. I wish I could show him some of their books that I brought today and some of the older versions that have been changed by the Baha'is. That's one of the problems. Another thing we might talk about biblically is that, Jesus was bodily resurrected. They don't believe that. And when Jesus said, I will raise up this temple in John 2:19-21.
Yeah.
Well, he said he's going to do it. And he was talking about the temple of his body, right? He is telling you he's going to do this. Whom do men say I am? So if you really have a good reading of the Bible, there's no way you're going to become a Baha'i. If Jesus is a true manifestation, take him at his word.
Yeah, and it's good. I would really, I hope that I'm going to find a way to get myself in, whether it's online or offline. I want to find a way to just interact with some Baha'is in the future. This has me really excited to do it, because I mean, it's when you actually understand that, now you can actually have a conversation, at least define terms, because that's one of the things too when you're dealing with counter cult ministries, is that you want to have a general understanding of their beliefs. That way you're not speaking past each other, and that way you can have an incorporated conversation, which I appreciate so much, because just having done this episode, I already feel like I have a level of confidence that I could at least carry a conversation versus 2 episodes ago when I'm like, oh wait, what? What do we even start
Baha'is
from here?
They're a lot of very kind people.
Yeah,
a lot of very sensitive people, and you got to really talk to them gently, but you got to make them think and challenge them. They just want to just go through it very emotionally, but you got to challenge them, confront them with Christ. I mean, you don't get the good news of the gospel till you hear the bad news.
Yeah.
And the bad news is we're rotten, filthy, stinking sinners cut off from God. And I mean, Jesus told the bad news, and we got to present the truth in love, but there's a lot of sweet souls or Baha'is, but they just haven't thought of the implications of, the differences between the different views of God and the implications of our guilt before God. They don't have any concept of guilt before God. They need to understand a lot of these things. They're so busy. It's almost like Baha'is, they wouldn't say this, but I mean, there's definitely almost like a real humanistic side to that religion. It's like a humanist religion. We're going to build our utopia here through education and our self-reformation instead of God's transformation. God coming as the righteous judge to settle accounts is a day of judgment. They don't have that kind of same concept. They have this kind of progressive, optimistic, hopeful world where we just get better and better and better. And that's the carrot. Every group has its reason for getting people in, and that's a lot of these sweet Baha'i people get in for that.
Yeah, man. So this has been so good. So with all that we've covered, is there anything else that we should be concerned about Baha'is or need to know, given that this is a area and group that we need to engage?
Absolutely. They're not an honest organization. A lot of Baha'is would think they are. There has been a history of censorship, a history of cover-ups in the Baha'is that you don't see in many other groups. It's pretty wild. You can just Google Baha'i censorship and stuff's going to come up. As far as books, as far as historical articles, they love to suppress things. Even their most holy book, the Kitab-i-Aqdas, this is supposed to be the words of Baha'u'llah for this, for this manifestation. The book was written in 1873. We didn't even get an English copy until 1992. And when William Miller, who was a Christian missionary who knew the language, went and translated, Baha'is were forbidden to read it. What are you trying to hide here? What about the strange writings of the Bab? Very few of those have been translated. They don't make those things readily available to Baha'is.
Right.
There's definitely an agenda for that. There's definitely a suppression. Maybe it's because there's some violent and bizarre contents in the Bayan and the writings of the Bab. Why do Baha'is not open? One of the big things I want to talk about today, and I want to bring something up that I don't think has been brought up before in the Christian response to Baha'is, and I think it's a pretty powerful illumination of who the Baha'is are. This is a very popular book written by John Esselman, who is a Christian who left to become a Baha'i. Baha'u'llah in the New Era. It's not by one of their central figures. It's not authoritative, but it's a book that they, give out often about Bahaism. There's a controversy came up because in the older editions of the book, they made a false prophecy. So just like the Jehovah's Witnesses have said 1914, 1915, 1918, 1925, 1941, 1975 were dates of Armageddon. And the Mormons said 1892 would wind up the scene. Well, these guys have done it also. They put a date of 1957. It just didn't come to pass. And I'll read the quote. Now, I've got, as I said, a huge library of Baha'i material, but not only the editions, I've got multiple editions. I brought like only 4 of my copies of this book today, of Baha'u'llah in the New Era. And when you go back, you can really see how they lie and they're a dishonest organization. Here's a quote from the book here, because in a table talk in which the writer was present, that's John Esselman, Abdul Baha said that these 1335 days, these are the days in the book of Daniel, these 1335 days mean 1335 solar years from the Hijrat. That's the flight of Muhammad when he went from Mecca to Medina, marking the beginning of the Mohammedan era. So just like, the Christian calendar, the Baha'i calendar starts, we're in year 180. Well, the Muslim calendar had that. Okay, as the Hijrat occurred in 622 AD, the date referred to is therefore 1957. So this is in their book. Asked, what shall we see at the end of the 1335 days? This is 1957. Now, this book was written way before. He replied, this is Abdul Baha, universal peace will be firmly established, a universal language promoted, misunderstandings will pass away, the Baha'i cause will be promulgated in all parts, and the oneness of mankind will be established. It will be most glorious. Now, do you remember that happening? Do you remember universal peace? We haven't had any wars since 57. No more misunderstandings since 57. Bahaism established. I mean, this is obviously a false prophecy. It's kind of like a millennial promise. It just never happened out there. A false prophecy. So what happened, this passage got changed in the later editions. So if you pick up this edition, it's an older one. I think this is 1940. That's the prophecies on the page in 1957. If you get the 1980 edition, which is after 1957, they've kind of doctored the books. So it says, in a table talk with the writer was present, Abdul-Baha said this, okay? And then he says, Abdul-Baha reckoned the fulfillment of Daniel's prophecies from the date of the beginning of the Mohammedan era. Abdul-Baha's tablets make it clear that this prophecy refers to the 100th anniversary of the declaration of Baha'u'llah in Baghdad, or the year 1963. Wait. Where was that part about misunderstandings will pass away, universal peace? It's just gone. It's gone from the page. They changed it from saying that all peace would happen, misunderstandings be gone, universal peace, Baha'i faith promulgated its cause, and they said 1863 to 1963 is the 100th anniversary of the Declaration of Baha'u'llah. It's gone. So it's kind of like the Jehovah's Witnesses in Time is at Hand, where they said in the first edition, 1914 will be the battle of the great day of God Almighty. Second edition, let's put 1915 there without a footnote, without any explanation, just like let's change everything, And the thing is, the Baha'is, they try to talk about the independent investigation into truth as one of their principles. How the heck is a Baha'i supposed to conduct an independent investigation of truth when the National Spiritual Assembly, who gives their authority in the front of this book, and then they go and they change dates on you? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
There's no independent investigation of truth when things are censored and changed and doctored.
Yeah, so, and also we're making a distinction between the organization and the individual, and which is really in case with most cults and cult members, that's what you'll see a lot. Like I said, if you listen to our Shinshanji episode, is that a lot of times people are going in, they're a true believer, they're usually dealing with some sort of crisis, trying to find meaning after a traumatic event. And in this case, it could be very much part and parcel to the same case versus, having an organization that's had a whole history where they do have to make for these changes that you see really like all the time.
But this is top-down deception in a corrupt organization that censors and changes things where the Baha'i doesn't know about it. They have a history of doing it. So Francis Beckwith is a Christian apologist. I think this might be out of print, but he did his master's thesis on Baha'is. Yeah. This is a book called Simply Baha'i from Bethany House publisher Walter Martin. And he brought up the 1957 false prophecy of how it was covered up. So the Universal House of Justice tries to make this feeble attempt to give excuses in order to cover up for the false prophecy and about the accusation of changing it to the 1963 thing, which is totally bogus. And they try to say that Shoghi Effendi, in one of his talks, it was completely unrelated to this incident. He did talk about don't confuse the words of an authority like Abdul-Baha with a pilgrim who was there to report it. And then they go on to try to spin it, and he says, it becomes clear then that Daniel's prophecy, the 1335 days, does not give the date of the establishment of world peace, but relates to the worldwide establishment of Baha'i faith. That's not what it says. They actually did say 1957 for years. It's the exact opposite of what Abdul-Baha said. The early editions in the 1957 false prophecy is in black and white, and they just try to dismiss it. So the Universal House of Justice then goes on to justify the rewording of the passage, the new date, with the new meaning, to say that they're still doing their job. This is a way of trying to preserve the purity within Baha'i faith. That's why we changed it, to bring it into alignment of what Abdul-Baha really taught. But that's a cover-up, not to mention the fact, I can't really go into it now, but we'll have to put on the examining site, that Abdul-Baha clearly taught that this century was going to be the end. He said it many, many times, but I mean, we'll have to get into that at another time. There's a lot to cover there.
Yeah.
So I found a really damning thing when I was going through the different editions of my books. It shows how the Universal House of Justice has again lied in their cover-up of the cover-up to try to say 1957 didn't happen. So they have this quote in the front of a book, and he goes, so I have the 1940 edition here, and he goes, during this visit, Abdul-Baha discussed the book with me on various occasions. So this is John Esselman in the forward saying, as I was putting together the book, I had a chance to bring it to Abdul-Baha to kind of proofread it. He goes, during this visit, Abdul-Baha discussed the book with me on various occasions. He gave me several valuable suggestions for its improvement and proposed that when I'd revise the manuscript, he would have the whole of it translated to Persian so they could read through it and amend or correct it where necessary. The revisal and translation were carried out suggested, and Abdul-Baha found time amid his busy life to correct 3.5 chapters, chapters 1, 4, 5, and part of 3, before he passed away. It is a matter of profound regret to me that Abdul-Baha was not able to complete the corrections of the manuscript, as the value of the book would thereby have been greatly enhanced. The whole of the manuscript has been carefully revised, however, by a committee of the National Baha'i Assembly of England, and its publication approved by that assembly. So this edition was actually approved by the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is. He goes on to say, I'm deeply indebted to this lady, and he goes on and on. Well, what's interesting is in the 1940, 1948 editions we have, there's something taken out from the earlier edition. In the 1930 edition, this completely smokes and shows what liars the Universal House of Justice is. In the earliest edition I have here, the 1930 edition, there was a part here in the prefatory note on page V, like 5, in the 1930 edition. Shoghi Effendi, the grandson of Abdul-Baha and guardian of the cause, has also read through the whole of the manuscript in English and given it his cordial approval. He knew about the 1957 date.
Yeah.
He gave this book his approval. The Universal House of Justice, when they try to, reply to Dr. Beckwith, they kind of sidestepped the issue. But now we've got a new thing for the Universal House of Justice and the Baha'is to answer. How come Shoghi Effendi agreed that this was legit on the 1957 false prophecy that they've been trying to cover up by changing 1963 with a whole new meaning, and then try to spin it on some more stuff?
Well, yeah, it's all. I mean, you see this all the time. It almost reminds me of it's like an episode of C-SPAN where you have some sort of investigative, exploratory committee on some controversial issue, but those people at the committee, they're literally on the same team of whatever side of the party of the controversy, or there's some sort of backdoor deal. So a lot of what you see is all smoke and mirrors, and it's like a WWE show where half of us is rooting for The Rock, half of us is rooting for Stone Cold, but we've already bought the pay-per-view.
But bottom line is, this is an organization that's clearly not to be trusted because of their history. What we've seen here, how they're really speak out of two sides of their mouth. It's not like a lot of the other things.
Right, and it goes to show, similar to Shincheonji, like if this guy has the direct insight into, I'm talking about Shincheonji, where if the leader had the direct insight into the book of Revelation, then why is he always having to change and redefine it?
Exactly.
In the same way, if this is really...
Complete parallel.
If this is the manifestation of Baha'u'llah, then what is the need for the cover-ups, and also what's the need to try and redefine your appeal to be syncretistic with all these other religions? Aren't you already syncretistic? Aren't you sort of the cherry on top and everything's already interconnected? Why do you have to what are you trying to cover up for or change? It's like you're trying to do a chiropractic adjustment on a back that's already straight. That wouldn't make sense.
Yeah. And it's kind of like what I said before. It's like man's nature. If we're already so good, then why do we have to fix something's not broken?
Awesome. Well, as we cover the last couple segments of our episode, what other important things should we kind of cover? And again, this is an overall encompassing view of Baha'i, and I'm really excited because even when I was trying to understand looking at Rainn Wilson, some of the statements he made when he released his book recently, Soul Boom, there seemed like there was really kind of hard to find good content out there. So I think this is a really good overall encompassing view of it, which I'm really thankful for.
There's a few things out there. This would be a good time. I was going to mention it later, but this is William Miller's phenomenal book, The Baha'i Faith, Its History and Teachings. This is available. This is where he actually translated the Kitab-i Aqdas a long time ago. He goes depth through the history of the Bab and the corruption where Baha'u'llah had to usurp the authority of Subi Azal away from the followers. This is another fantastic book. This is he calls it his magnum opus. Is a friend of mine, Kenami, and it's an independent investigation of the Baha'i faith. It's about over 800 pages, 1,100 footnotes, and he goes really deep into it. This one's currently available. Russ Williams has also done a masterful job of analyzing Baha'i beliefs, and Russ is right now doing a update to this book and hopefully an ebook. Russ Williams. Hopefully by the time people listen to this, you can check that out. That book deals a lot with how Baha'is try to say that Baha'u'llah has come and fulfilled all the prophecies of Jesus. And he goes into a lot more other stuff, but he does a masterful job of going through that.
Wow.
So just like a few more issues. So I was going to say here, they want heaven and earth now. They don't talk much about the afterlife. They really don't, like we do. Our hope is in heaven. We're citizens of heaven. We store up our treasure, right? Baha'is are very much about the here and now. That's why I said this. It's got a real humanistic feel. The United Nations cannot create peace. This is something I wrote, and I think it hits the bill here. The United Nations cannot create peace and eliminate war. The courts cannot create unity and brotherhood, and the social justice movement cannot eliminate racism and hatred in the heart of man. This is something that needs to come from above. Men have tried it for thousands of years, and we're just rotten sinners. I'm sorry. It's just like the courts can't do it. The UN, the answer is God through Christ.
Yeah.
So Baha'is want self-reformation, and self-reformation is change from the outside in, but God promises a new heart where you're changed from the inside out. And that's the answer that the Baha'is are sorely missing as they're trying to, build this new world brick by brick of eliminating all these bad things in this world. Education does not make someone better. It might make you a better thief or a better crook because you might learn how to be a better thief, but it's not going to change the heart. So Bahaism makes false promises. They promise what can only be obtained next world, obtain next world in this world. They want to promise the utopia of the future. They want to put it in this world. They ignore man's fallen nature. There's persecution. Why? Because there's hatred and prejudice and war and all the bad stuff that goes along with humanity. They promise a false peace on this side of heaven. That's all they can do. Baha'i leaders say that men can work to bring to this earth now, while we, with sinful hearts, we have an inclination to evil. It's just delusional. I mean, I said, look at the history of wars, look at the headlines daily. Everywhere you look, man has a sinful nature that exists throughout each of these religious cycles. And as a part of our sinfulness, man is selfish, so it's unrealistic to think that we can just use education to bring equality to people. The station given to Baha'u'llah means that he not only gives new teachings for our time, but he becomes an infallible interpreter of all of the religions and scriptures, which is, again, I mentioned that earlier, it's wrong. I mean, you think Baha'u'llah can understand, we have to adopt Baha'u'llah's view in the Bible after we've already seen how he contradicts who Jesus was, who he said he was. So the truth was given right through the book of Revelation. We didn't need another manifestation to come along, right from Christ's time, right to the consummation. There's no other manifestations coming along. It's already been spelled out. If Muhammad's rules, stood for like 1,200 years still, they had to be updated by the Bab. Why was the Bab only around for just a handful of years? He didn't get 50 years. He didn't get 100 years.
Yeah.
What did man change so much in that cycle? That God had to send a new prophet to update him with Baha'u'llah. It doesn't make any sense. It's not like it ran like his 600-year course. One more thing I have to mention too, Baha'is are really bad at shunning. So just like the Jehovah's Witnesses with their disfellowshipping, so if you're a Jehovah's Witness and you leave the organization, you could be walking by your mother or your child on the street and you can't make eye contact. You got to keep on walking. You can't say hi. You just got to ignore them like they're dead because they're out of the organization. Scientology's disconnection. The Amish do it too really bad. Well, Baha'is have a really bad one too. So if you're a covenant breaker, and these are people who are excommunicated for opposing those in Baha'i succession leadership, if you're trying to create schisms, if you have like that free thinking kind of way, you're to be shunned too for the rest of your life, and you're disowned. Shoghi Effendi had constant fights with his family. They're covenant breakers, and there's a major shunning going on. So he lost his family. I mean, a lot of other big leaders too. And he commands, Shoghi Effendi, the guardian, commanded Baha'is to have nothing to do with people and to shun them too. And where's the love? Where's the restoration? God is a God of love. He talks about restoration, loving people, bringing them back. But these cults, if you're not walking in, if you're not falling into line, they're going to shun you and kick you out forever. And where's the love of God in that?
Well, if everything is a manifest, and this is also the self-refutation covenant breaking, is that one is trying to give this appeal of being syncretistic. Well, and everything is just a manifestation of Baha'u'llah. Well, like, you're still, if someone's still a covenant breaker, you're still being placed from somewhere else into you're still part of the manifestation of Baha'u'llah because you're just a covenant breaker. So it's like
not anymore. Yeah, you get the left foot of fellowship.
Right. So there's an inconsistency
because
you're trying to do we are the children, we are the world, but as soon as you fall out of line, well, you're not anymore. So
can't even acknowledge your existence anymore.
So what's so interesting, because even the cultural aesthetic is sort of this universal brotherhood and this sort of universalistic mindset, when in reality they are being exclusive and they're shunning other people, which is something that people on the surface level, even who maybe were in Baha'i for an experiential reason may not really have a true self-awareness of this type of doctrine.
Well, they're going to be very offended by the fact that I call them a cult. They say, no, we're a world religion, because they've heard that so often. But I mean, they have the marks of a cult. They have that centralized leadership that censors, that changes things. They do the shunning, so they the information control, right? You talk about the bite model. There's some of it going on right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a dishonest organization. It came out of, the kind of shaky cult, that the Baha'u'llah, and then Bahaism, to me, is a cult.
Yeah.
And this is a cult. So, I mean, I don't call them religion. I don't dignify them that way, especially Bahaism, which is the most dishonest one. It was a usurping the way Baha'u'llah rose to power. As we said last week, Subi Azal was the rightful hand-chosen leader of the Bab. He was supposed to be a successor, and then Baha'u'llah stole away everything from Subi Azal, his half-brother, and then he pronounced himself the new manifestation. So right from the beginning, just corruption, right to the end.
Wow. Yeah, and as we're up here, I think you show the distinction between like the organization and the member. And I think on some sense, you do see an organization that claims to speak for God, and you see the corruption, and you see
prophets.
And false prophets, and you see false prophecy, and you see contradictions, you see changes, which is just birds of a feather flock together. And in the same way, you see that, and then you have people who are souls, image bearers of God, who end up wanting to be part of it. They get caught into an organization like this, and they end up getting false hope because people are made with a God-shaped hole, and they try and fill that with something like the Baha'i faith, but they still don't have what we ultimately need is not a manifestation but Baha'i with Bahai or Baha'u'llah, but we need a saving relationship with Jesus Christ.
But they say God is unknowable. So you talk about relationship, remember?
Yeah.
They've rewritten a lot of this stuff. It's pretty bad.
Right, and that's where the self-refutation is. If they're saying that, they're also making a knowledge claim that's refuting their own position, which is also just something.
Well, they do talk about being relativistic.
Oh, yeah.
They're open about that, yeah.
Yeah, they're open about that.
And they're kind of universalists, too.
Well, until you become a covenant breaker.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, then it's like, well.
Right.
But they're kind of universalists. They're kind of humanists. Christianity, I guess we're probably getting close to wrapping up here, but Christianity is a very exclusive religion. Christianity is very narrow and exclusive in who Christ was and the condition of man, the remedy for man's condition. We're not syncretistic where we can coexist with all these other, contradictory, avoid, laws of logic, contradictions of other religions. We're very narrow and defined like that. Bahaism tries to say that they're very inclusive, but they're very exclusive when you push them on it, saying that we all have to follow this Iranian prophet. They smile a lot to you and say, oh, but all religions are true. But in reality, they only believe that they have the truth that's come down through the succession of, for the Bab to Baha'u'llah to Abdul Baha to Shoghi Effendi, now the House of Justice. They're all infallible mouthpieces for God.
Until they're not.
Well, the Baha'is, they think they are.
Right, exactly. And this is, well, thank you, man. This has been really overall encompassing a lot of information. I've learned a lot. And I think ultimately the catalyst for me is like, I want to be able to learn and understand and apply it to be able to give an answer. And this is one of the things I love is that as a Christian, this is like our faith is something that you have to think through, you have to wrestle through.
Not just feel.
Right, and not just feel. And the thing is, too, is that, when you look at Rainn Wilson, he's a smart cat. Like, he's very knowledgeable. He's a very smart individual. He's very talented, of course. And, when you look at him initially sort of talking about, what he talks about, you're like, ooh, you feel like a little.
Notice how he talks too.
Yeah,
he kind of makes it sound hip, like the Baha'i thing, and then he just doesn't say. He says, "Oh, it's about being spiritual, and you need to have spirituality." That might resonate with a lot of people. Like, you know what? I'm ignoring that part of my life. I work out in the gym. I try to be successful at work, but I'm just not working on being spiritual. But spiritual is on the grounds of going through this Iranian prophet.
I know
who is going to come along and say everything you believed about the Bible is wrong. Jesus was not God. He was martyred. He was just a teacher. He didn't raise from the dead.
Right.
And he's going to come. But when Rainn speaks, it's like, this whole touchy feely. Yeah.
And his voice is voice is so recognizable, of course. And so part of it's like, well, I can imagine him saying, imagine if Schrut's beet farm was a church.
I was just about to say, go back to the beet farm.
if
took the words out of my
True
mouth.
Speed Farm was a church, it would be Bahai, and this is why. So it's just when you hear him talk, it's like, well, now that I understand this, and now you actually wrestle through what their claims are, you see, like I walk away with like confidence that even if I doubt in my lifetime I'll have a conversation with someone like Rainn Wilson, but if I now the next time
You could get him on the show.
yeah. Hey, that'd be
I'll
cool.
show up.
That'd be cool if that happens. Yeah, and but it's just like I have now a level of confidence that we should, regardless of whether it's Baha'i, whether it's Islam, whether it's really any unbelieving worldview. You walk away when you wrestle through the issues, whether it's the Trinity, the inerrancy of the Bible, the authority of Jesus, all these things. When you wrestle through them, when you walk in the arena of ideas, and here's the difference too, is that true biblical Christianity, we don't isolate people. We don't say, no, you can't, we don't shun people because we don't want to engage you in the conversation. Like real apologetics, what I love about this, it happens in the arena of ideas. And what's amazing is that it is a scary process to walk in an opposing worldview, especially in a culture, even with you being in California, where everything is just all, hey, live and let live, let's get together, man. And it is a scary arena to jump into, but you walk away with this level of confidence. You're like, wow, this is amazing. And so I would say too, if you're on the fence as a Christian, like wherever you are, like get into the arena, be challenged, and be okay with having your boat rock. Like take some on the chin. You might get shooken up a little bit, but when you double down your mouthpiece and jump back in and learn from that, you'll be amazed how much confidence it gives you. And this is something that I feel like I've applied learn in real time these last 2 episodes. So thank you again for coming on, man.
You've done so many shows over the years, and look at how the other ones just don't stand up. Mm-hmm. When you start digging in like deeper like this, you find how they're built on sand. They're man-made stuff where they resort to cover-up, behavioral manipulation. Healthy Christianity doesn't have any of that stuff. Mm-hmm. It's like, we're not going to tell you don't read this book, just like the Baha'is do, or Shinjanji, or Jehovah's Witnesses. It's like, bring it on. Bring on the atheists. Bring on the Muslims. We'll talk to you. Mm-hmm. Christianity is a very different thinking man's faith.
Yeah. No, definitely. Well, on that note, I'm thinking, pun intended, we should go ahead and at least wrap it up. We've covered a lot of ground. I'm very interested to hear the response. So, and who knows, maybe we've got a large YouTube following. Maybe someone will copy a YouTube link and send it to, maybe somebody's a buddy with Rainn, will send it to him. Maybe he'll listen in. So, Rainn, if you listen, we love you. We love your show, The Office, and ultimately, a very talented individual. And I hope that, to use a Walter Martin definition, we hope that you will get a soul boom into a saving relationship with Jesus Christ.
Amen.
That would be the hope of this. So, all that being said, we appreciate you all for listening in. We'll talk to you all next time on Cultish, where we enter into the kingdom of the cults. Talk to you guys soon.